Overnight, a river is filled with dead bodies floating in it. The police arrived at the scene, turned them over, and instantly turned pale with fear. The deceased's entire body was drained of water. The situation was very strange, and the next death toll grew. The point is that they were all dead in the river. They were all in the same condition. His name was Jay Hayek. He was a salesman for a pharmaceutical company. He happened to be playing golf with a client that day, but one of the clients was very strange, and he kept drinking water. After drinking several bottles of water, he was still thirsty. Finally, he jumped into the river. In a few seconds, he floated to the surface of the water. Jay Hayek rushed to turn him over, but the man had turned into a horrible dry corpse. Jay Hayek was terrified. This morning, he heard on the news that such dead people appeared all over Korea. Little did he know that his client had also become like this. He decided to go home when his business deal failed. But when he got home, he found his wife and children were drinking water like crazy. He panicked. He rushed to dress the children and tried to take them to the hospital. On the other hand, the police started studying the dry bodies. They found that the dead all had one thing in common. They had all been to the same river not long ago to play. Jay Hayek's brother J-Pil is a police officer. He was ordered to visit a village near the river to investigate the water source, but the villagers resented the police. They feared that if the investigation went on, no one would dare to come and play again. J-Pil had to sleep in his car. When he woke up the next day, he was stunned. The whole river was full of dead bodies. The police suspected that the water was poisoned, but after testing the water, they found no toxins, just some insect eggs. Someone else reported that a family member had died in the bathtub. The police rushed in and saw a horrific sight. Long worms had burrowed out of the victim's body. Doctors studied them and found it was a new variant of nematode. Originally, wireworms were only parasitic on insects, but now, they have evolved to parasitize the human body. When it comes to laying eggs, they stimulate the brain nerves of humans so that they can detach themselves from the human body and ovulate. It is through the human anus or mouth that the variant enters the body. The parasitic humans unknowingly provide them with a great deal of nutrition in their daily diet. As they mature, they stimulate the human brain, giving the illusion of thirst, until the human is so thirsty that they jump into the water of their own accord. They will then burrow out and lay their eggs and reproduce. When the news broke, it caused panic across the country because that river is the most important water source in Korea. Soon hospitals were filled with patients, but nematodes cannot be surgically removed because they're attached to the human intestine. One specialist said they could try maggot medicine, but before they could do a clinical trial, a new case was brought into the hospital. A girl who had taken the dewormer was foaming at the mouth and screaming in pain. Before long, she was dead. The government is at a loss to come up with a solution. Had to gather patients in hospital first, but they didn't know that all nematodes attacks are clustered. Once someone has an attack, everyone around them will have an attack. Gradually, the crowd became agitated. Meanwhile, the Jay Hayek family was packing their bags. Suddenly, his wife looks at the tap, and her eyes become desperately hungry. His wife buried her head in the sink. Jay Hayek rushes to pull her out, but it's no use, because she had lost her mind and was drowning herself. The children also lost control, and the son kept filling himself with water. The daughter kept tapping on the window. Jay Hayek clings desperately to his wife who wants to rush out. He quickly dragged his daughter back. Then he held the children tightly and pinned his legs around his wife, trying his best to stop them, but the crowd outside had already started to erupt. They ran outside like zombies, trying to find the nearest water source. Some jump into the park's water spring. Some even smashed their heads into the fish tanks on the side of the road. The city was in chaos. As he watched the tragedy unfold, a village elder provided an important clue. One night, he saw someone put a sick dog into the river. To avoid affecting the tourist revenue, he secretly fished up the sick dog and buried it without making a secret of the incident. The result was the tragedy of today. Just when everyone was feeling desperate, a recovered patient turned up at the hospital. The specialist discovered he had recovered after taking maggot medicine from a pharmaceutical company. Jay Hayek's pharmaceutical company produced the medicine, but this medicine has long been discontinued. Every pharmacy had sold out of it. Meanwhile, government officials have approached the pharmaceutical company. They want them to resume production of the maggot drug. At the hospital, the infected and their families have been isolated. Jay Hayek could only communicate with his wife through the window. At night, all the infected people suddenly lost control of their illness. They rushed into the streets and jumped into the river without a thought. One night, the river was filled with floating bodies. To add to the despair, the production line at the pharmaceutical plant had already been paralyzed. The company representatives refused to disclose the prescriptions. The unscrupulous business people tried to coerce the government into buying the company at a high price, so negotiations are at a standstill. Jae-hyuk, with the help of a colleague, buys a box of drugs from the inside at a high price, but it was accidentally exposed, and the crazy people robbed it all. When the colleague saw this, he told Jae-hyuk that there was much stock of the drug before it was discontinued. Someone must have bought it out on purpose, so Jae-hyuk went online and finally contacted a drug dealer. He was just about to make the deal when the police arrived. To avoid responsibility, the drug dealer flushed all the drugs down the toilet, destroying the evidence. Jae-hyuk was completely desperate. Just then, Jae-pil called and told him that he knew the warehouse where the medicine was kept. Jae-hyuk immediately drove there. The woman lifted a bucket of water and poured it into her mouth as fast as she could. She doesn't care that her belly will burst. She was already under the control of the wireworm in her body. He was so thirsty that he lost his senses. Suddenly, the person next to her embraced her. The woman shouted, "Think of your child." Jae-hyuk's wife woke up with a start. On the other hand, Jae-hyuk, looking for medicine everywhere, received a call from Jae-pil. He said that he had found the whereabouts of the company's former researcher. The two men immediately set out to question the researcher, who finally reveals the truth. It turns out that the owner of the company deliberately put mutant nematodes into the water in order to make money. They bought many shares in the company. Then they waited for the wireworm to infect the population. When the company's stock rose sharply, they released the stockpiled drugs in large quantities and sold off their shares, thus making much money. Jae-hyuk and Jae-pil rushed to the warehouse where the drugs were stored, but they were locked in. A lighter was thrown in and instantly all the medicine was on fire. Jae-hyuk lunges frantically, only to be stopped by Jae-pil. The two were trapped in the fire and gradually lose consciousness. Suddenly, a big truck rushed in and saved them. The person who saved them was Jae-pil's girlfriend. When Jae-hyuk woke up, the first thing he did was rush into the fire, but there wasn't even a single crumb of medicine left at the scene. He cried as he held a handful of ashes. How can he save his family without medicine? At the end of his tether, Jae-hyuk suddenly thought that the most important thing for pharmaceuticals is the raw material. If they could get the active ingredients, any pharmaceutical company could produce the medicine. So, the two of them split up. Jae-pil goes to the hospital to care for his family, while Jae-hyuk goes to the pharmaceutical factory to find the ingredients. Meanwhile, a patient's body is filled with iron nematodes in the hospital, and they burst out. The people in the hospital screamed in fear. Seeing this, the mother rushed to cover the child's eyes, but the child also said his throat was itchy. The nematode in the child's body was on the move. What will happen next? The mother dared not think about it. All she could do was hold the child tightly, but the mother is afraid she won't be able to hold on either. She was already dizzy. Her eyes were hallucinating, looking at the fire sprinklers above her head. She wanted water to pour down there. Gradually, her eyes turned to the fire switch. Suddenly, the other woman, who had lost her mind, approached the switch. This jolted her awake. She immediately rushed to stop the woman. They fought but attracted more attention. They all jumped on her. She was powerless to resist. Jae-pil saw the scene from the window but couldn't get in. Suddenly an idea came to him. He rushed upstairs as fast as possible and switched off the water supply. And with that, the patients were saved for the time being. But if they continued, the nematodes in their bodies would have exploded. Meanwhile, Jae-hyuk drove to the pharmaceutical factory where the ingredients were stored. Eventually, he found it. He delivered it to the research team. With the help of his efforts, all pharmaceutical companies are producing at full capacity at the same time. The drugs were soon delivered across the country, and people finally saw the light of day. Jae-hyuk's family was finally saved. The prime minister, who was about to sign the purchase agreement, suddenly tore it up. It turned out that the police had found the real mastermind, the representative of the pharmaceutical company. Their plot is completely uncovered, and the unscrupulous businessman is brought to justice. The horror of the disaster is over, but unbeknownst to them, a body had drifted downstream to a distant place, and the crisis doesn't seem to be over either. Well, subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you next time.